Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Kris. This is a request from me. On location, Lincoln and Grant's final meeting, Appomattox 160. This is from American Battlefield Trust. They've got a couple videos. It's one video per day covering the Gettysburg campaign, and I think that would be awesome to do. So I'm going to do that, but not right now. If you can click that thumbs up, bare minimum, please, that helps out. Subscribe to the channel if you like it, and if you like the content, and click on that thanks button. Donate to the channel, keep it running. All right, let's see what this is about.
This is quite a thrill for me because on the morning of April 3rd, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln came through this very fence and walked towards the steps of the Thomas Wallace House, where he greeted General Ulysses S. Grant. And the accounts say that Lincoln came in with long strides and kept shaking Grant's hand like he would never let him go, because obviously he was thrilled with what had occurred the day before. And on April the 3rd, 1865, just before dawn, Union troops came into Petersburg after 292 days of the longest campaign in the American Civil War, and it would be concluded here with a discussion on the porch of the Thomas Wallace House. Now, this house was built in 1855. Thomas Wallace was the president of the Petersburg branch of the Exchange Bank, and he was typical of what the ruling class, the wealthy people of this city were like, because most of them were commission merchants or professionals like bank presidents, and this was a typical house on Market Street. You know, Petersburg was the 7th largest city in the Confederacy and was a very, very wealthy town. And Thomas Wallace was one of the leading citizens of the town. In fact, he ran for the state convention in Richmond, the first secession convention, as a secessionist, and was defeated by a man named Thomas Branch, who was a conditional unionist.
And he knew Abraham Lincoln, right?
Yes, he did. And so Branch continued to, or Wallace rather, continued to reside here. And on the morning of April the 3rd, President Lincoln took the United States Military Railroad in from City Point, where he had been since March the 24th. Yeah. He had come down on the 23rd with his wife on the River Queen in order to be on the scene, because Grant had invited him to come down because Grant was aware that the final campaign was about to begin. And Lincoln had a very famous meeting on March 28th with General Sherman, General Meade, General Ord, Admiral Porter, and General Grant and Sheridan, all discussing what would occur as the campaign began on March the 29th. And of course, we've talked about the battles that occurred between the 29th and April the 2nd. Petersburg is evacuated on the night of April the 2nd, and Grant arrives from his field headquarters here at the Wallace House, where he is going to meet with the president.
It's an incredible moment, too. I mean, I think they portrayed it, at least to some degree, in the History Channel's three-part series on Grant. They have Grant, who I think did a good job here, up on this porch, and it is just amazing to me the speed at which things are happening. It's no surprise people write books about April of 1865, because so much happens, especially in the first 2.5 weeks of that month. It's just unbelievable.
Well, it's hard to, Grant has his personality. We all know that he is a much more controlled person. I can only imagine what Lincoln was feeling after all of the sacrifices and all of the heartbreak and all of the opposition and the doubt that he had undergone in the last 4 years, to finally come up and shake Grant's hand in Petersburg. And they talked, Gary, here for about 90 minutes. They stayed on the porch. Grant, of course, was smoking his ubiquitous cigar.
Oh, sorry. And we don't know where on the porch, nor do we know exactly what they said.
No, we don't. We really don't. Although the conventional wisdom, of course, is they discussed what was going to happen next. The reason they were here for an hour and a half in their discussion, not only they probably had a lot to talk about, but Lincoln and Grant were both anxious to hear that Richmond had been occupied.
Yes.
But that, of course, it had been, but the word had not filtered down. And after an hour and a half, Grant politely excused himself. He had business to attend to.
Busy guy.
And of course, Lincoln would return to City Point that afternoon. They passed through the area called Fort Damnation, Fort Mahone, where some of the serious fighting had taken place on April 2nd. All the corpses, some of the wounded were still there. And people who had traveled with Lincoln up to Petersburg remembered how affected the president was by those scenes.
And to this day, when people see those photos, more than the photos that they see at Antietam and Spotsylvania and Gettysburg, it's those that afterward we know were in the last week of the war. They seem especially sad, and people seem to be moved by those to this day.
Well, and of course, the next day, on April the 4th, Lincoln decides to go to Richmond.
This was the end of the Civil War. Is pretty much the start of trench warfare. Now, had it been done before? Yes. Had it been utilized as like in World War I, had it been used before? Civil War was kind of an entrenching way to fortify a section where you could run all along. You just ducked down, ran that line. It kind of was not pioneered. It was more perfected in 1863, 64, and was used as the fighting edge, the cutting edge of fighting technology for World War I. It was really ahead of its time, and it was crazy that it happened that way. By the way, this guy right here, Gary Alderman, if you get on American Battlefield Trust, this site, this channel, he does a driving tour through Gettysburg. It's just an awesome video. Takes you through the entire thing. It's great. He's really, really good.
Well, and of course, the next day, on April the 4th, Lincoln decides to go to Richmond. By now, obviously, the word had arrived that the Union forces occupied the Confederate capital, and Lincoln went to Richmond. That's a well-known story. Yes. About how he walked from the Rocket's Landing up to the White House of the Confederacy, and he returned then to City Point.
So I've been to the White House of the South, the Confederate White House in Richmond, and it was there was a first floor. You have to excuse me. It's been like 9 years. There's a first floor. You walked all around it, and then there was a second floor, and let me check. Okay. So this is just if you've never seen it before. This is the Confederate White House. That's a terrible picture. Right across the street is the museum. Been in there. Had a conversation with a person there who goes, "Where are you from?" I said, "Illinois." And they said, "Oh, you know about that Lincoln fella?" I said, "Yeah, I've heard of him." But anyway, this is what I wanted to point out. So the other side of the building is where the columns are. This was originally a 2-story building, right to there. Then a 3rd story was added. So when Lincoln came in, he went here and here, did not go on the 3rd floor. And that was because the 3rd floor was the residency. That's where Jefferson Davis and his wife, was it Abilene? I don't remember. I apologize. That was where their personal stuff was. You didn't go up there. Even when the Union secured the house, you did not go up there. That was personal stuff. And a gentleman did not go through all that. And I was like, well, I would. Maybe I'm going to find something that's vital for the war. And my tour guide goes, well, you're clearly not a gentleman. And I was like, man, well, I'm trying to win a war here. And he goes, yep, but that wasn't on their mind. That's not gentleman behavior. You don't rummage through clothes or, underwear, undergarments. That's what he said. You don't do that. And I was like, okay. But yeah, I just thought that was pretty interesting. And then they said Lincoln went in and sat in Jefferson Davis's chair and put his feet up on the desk. Everyone that's there said that he did not do that. He put his hat on the desk and sat in the chair and just kind of looked back. The Confederates, well, after the war, the people of the South made that up as a disrespect. I don't see Lincoln doing that, but that's what they say.
When he would come back to Petersburg.
And by the way, that was verified by the people in the museum. They said he did not do that, contrary to what is expected to be believed. Again
on April the 8th. And he returned then to City Point. He would come back to Petersburg again on April the 8th and visit again before he would return to Washington.
You talk about things that if only a photographer could have been here on this porch, if only one could have been at the White House of the Confederacy when Lincoln went there, or when he was mobbed in the streets. It's just so much now. It's what's amazing to me too is it was a very unceremonial arrival in Richmond, and even here it's him and his son Tad and maybe Admiral Porter. I mean, he doesn't have a big entourage, and this is the President of the United States in a hostile territory, only recently captured that day, arriving in a place like this, yes. And then in Richmond soon after. And there were some expressions for his safety waiting for him at City Point when he returned from Petersburg.
Well, and I love Petersburg. I've lived here for many, many years. This is my favorite place. But it is interesting to note that until recently, when this house was partially restored and turned into an Airbnb where people can actually stay, it had been a rundown house, and there's no real historical markers in front. Here is a very important place, but it's in a southern city. And the meeting of Lincoln and Grant to preside over the collapse of Petersburg was not something that local citizens were all that pleased about. And so I think in other places this would be a shrine. This would be a place where people would flock and pay $15 to come and visit and hear the story. And today the traffic goes by on Market Street, and I would say that 99% of the people had no idea what happened here.
Now, you mentioned a couple of things. So first of all, yes, you can stay here, and Kris and I can attest it's comfortable, and the price is reasonable, especially for the very large accommodations here that you get. So we encourage you to check that out on Airbnb. There also is a Civil War Trails sign across the street, but you have to work kind of hard in Petersburg to get the place. But of all the antebellum homes in town, I took a jog this morning, and there's just antebellum homes everywhere. It's beautiful, and you can sort of see the seeds of some of it starting to come back, like Richmond and Chattanooga and other places. So we hope you'll come here. There's a nice coffee shop, the Market House Coffee or Market Street Coffee down the street there. You could stay here. You could see historic sites galore for 2 weeks and not be all done.
Absolutely. We hope that people do come here, and even if they don't stay, to stand or sit on this porch and reflect on what happened here for 90 minutes on April 3rd, 1865.
And then, of course, 11 days later, what happened after Lincoln's exuberant moment here and at other places, and what is going to be his sad end at Ford's Theater on April 14th and then across the street on the 15th. Anything else to add, Will?
I think that's it. I just hope that this video encourages people to come to Petersburg, visit the Wallace House, visit so many of the other historic sites in Petersburg, the Old Blandford Church, the Petersburg Battlefield, the Pamplin Historical Park, all the land that the American Battlefield Trust has preserved here. As Gary says, you could spend easily a week or two visiting historic sites in Petersburg. So come visit us.
Thanks so much, Will Green, co-founder of the American Battlefield Trust, prolific author. And we hope you'll watch the rest of this series where we covered, as Will mentioned, City Point and the Five Forks and the Breakthrough. And then follow us from here and find out what General Grant and his soldiers did afterward. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to Kris White behind the camera. Thank you, Will. And thank you for supporting battlefield education and preservation.
Hello, this is Trace Atkins. Just stay up to date on.
What a time to pause. Hello. Sorry, sir. You deep voiced bastard just scared the shit out of me. All right. All right. Well, we're going to end this here. Hope you enjoyed it. I thought that was pretty good. Until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.